In 2023, the ocean did something it had never done before in recorded human history. It ran a fever. Not a metaphorical fever, not a statistical anomaly buried in a scientific paper that nobody reads. A fever. The average temperature of the world's ocean surface in 2023 was the highest ever measured. Not by a small margin, not by a fraction of a degree that requires a microscope to see, by a margin so large that when scientists plotted it on their graphs, the 2023 line did not just sit above the previous record, it sat above it by a gap that looked wrong. One scientist at the University of Maine, whose job it is to track ocean temperatures every single day, described looking at the data and thinking there had been an error. He checked the instruments, he checked the data pipeline, he checked the calculations. There was no error. The ocean was just that hot, and 2024 was hotter still. Right now, as you watch this, the ocean is doing 5 things simultaneously that no climate model fully predicted. 5 separate, independent, measurable changes to the fundamental systems that regulate the temperature of every city you have ever lived in, the rainfall that grows every crop you have ever eaten, and the oxygen in every breath you are taking right now. 5 things, all at once, all accelerating, and most people on this planet have no idea. This is Abyss Files. Subscribe if you are new here. What comes next is going to change the way you understand the planet you live on. Before we go any further, I want to give you a number: 93. 93% of the excess heat that human civilization has added to this planet's atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution has been absorbed by the ocean, not by the air, not by the land, not by the ice caps. The ocean. Think about what that means for a moment. Every coal-fired power plant that has ever run, every car engine that has ever turned over, every forest that has ever been cleared and burned, every factory, every airplane, every heating system, every bonfire and cook stove and gas flare on this planet for the last 200 years. 93% of the heat all of that has generated has gone into the ocean. The ocean has been absorbing our mistakes for 2 centuries. It has been doing it quietly, without complaint, without any visible sign at the surface that anything was happening, because water is extraordinarily good at absorbing heat. A cubic meter of seawater can store 4,000 times more heat than a cubic meter of air. 4,000 times. The ocean is the most effective heat storage system on this planet, and for 200 years it has been filling up, and now it is full. Not metaphorically full, measurably, quantifiably, instrumentally full in ways that are showing up in the data from every ocean monitoring system on the planet. The ocean cannot keep absorbing heat at this rate without changing, and it is changing. 5 ways, all at once, all accelerating. Let us go through them one by one. The first change is the one that should concern you most, not because it is the most dramatic. The others are more visually striking, more immediately devastating, but because it is the most fundamental. Because if this one goes wrong, everything else becomes a secondary consideration. It is called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Most people have never heard this name. That is one of the problems. You may have heard of the Gulf Stream, the vast river of warm water that flows northeast from the Gulf of Mexico, across the North Atlantic toward Europe. The current that keeps London warmer than it should be at its latitude. The current that keeps the eastern seaboard of the United States from experiencing winters that would be comparable to Siberia. The Gulf Stream is part of a larger system, a planetary system. a continuous loop of ocean water that circulates around the entire Atlantic basin and through connections in the Southern Ocean around the entire planet. This system is called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Scientists call it AMOC. Here is how it works. Warm, salty water from the tropics flows north on the ocean surface. You know part of this as the Gulf Stream. As it flows north, it loses heat to the atmosphere, warming Europe and the northeastern United States. In the process, as it cools, it becomes denser. As it reaches the far North Atlantic and the seas around Greenland, it becomes dense enough to sink. It sinks deep, hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 meters, and then flows south along the ocean floor. This cold, deep water travels back toward the equator, rises, warms, and begins the cycle again. This circulation has been running continuously for approximately 12,000 years, since the end of the last ice age. For the entire span of human civilization, it redistributes heat from the equator to the poles. It carries nutrients from the deep ocean to the surface. It drives the rainfall patterns of Europe, North America, and the West African Sahel. It regulates the monsoons that grow the food that feeds more than half the world's population. Without AMOC, Europe would be several degrees colder. New York winters would be dramatically harsher. The monsoon systems that India, West Africa, and South America depend on would shift in ways that would be catastrophic for agriculture. And AMOC is slowing down. Not because of a single dramatic event, not because of a sudden change, because of something quiet and incremental and almost invisible happening thousands of miles away in the Arctic. Greenland is melting. The Greenland ice sheet contains enough frozen water that if it fully melted, global sea levels would rise by approximately 7 meters. 7 meters. That is enough to permanently inundate Miami, Amsterdam, Bangkok, Shanghai, Mumbai, and dozens of other major coastal cities. It is not melting that fast. Not yet. But it is melting. Every year, the Greenland ice sheet loses hundreds of billions of tons of ice. That ice melts into fresh water. That fresh water flows into the North Atlantic. Here is the problem. Fresh water is less dense than salt water. The AMOC works because cold, salty North Atlantic water is dense enough to sink, dense enough to drive the deep return flow of the circulation, dense enough to maintain the pump that keeps the whole system running. When fresh water from melting Greenland ice enters the North Atlantic, it dilutes the salt, it reduces the density, the water becomes less willing to sink, the pump weakens. Scientists published a study in 2023 in the journal Nature Communications, a study conducted by Peter Ditlevsen and Suzanne Ditlevsen of the University of Copenhagen, that used statistical analysis of sea surface temperature data going back to the 1850s to look for early warning signals in the AMOC system. What they found was deeply troubling. The data showed clear signs of what mathematicians call a loss of resilience. A system that is approaching a tipping point becomes less able to recover from perturbations. It oscillates more before returning to its normal state. It takes longer to bounce back. The AMOC data showed exactly these patterns. Their conclusion: AMOC could be approaching a tipping point. The collapse, not a gradual slowdown, but an abrupt, potentially irreversible reorganization of the entire circulation system, could come anywhere between now and the end of this century. Their best estimate placed the most likely collapse somewhere in the middle of this century. Their findings were contested by other scientists. Some argued the statistical method was not reliable enough to make such a specific prediction. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said in its most recent assessment that a full AMOC collapse this century was unlikely, though it rated even that conclusion only with medium confidence. The debate among scientists is real. The uncertainty is real. But here is what is not uncertain. AMOC has slowed. That is not a prediction. That is a measurement. Proxy data from ocean sediments. Data that allows scientists to reconstruct past circulation strength going back thousands of years, shows that AMOC today is weaker than at any point in the last 1,000 years. 1,000 years. The circulation that has maintained the climate of the North Atlantic for the entire span of human civilization is running at its weakest in a millennium, and it is still weakening. When scientists at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in Germany published their analysis, they were careful with their language. They said the qualitative statement that AMOC has been losing stability in the last century remains true, even accounting for all uncertainties. Losing stability. In the language of climate science, that phrase carries enormous weight. A system that is losing stability is a system that is approaching a threshold beyond which behavior becomes unpredictable, beyond which small changes can produce large and sudden consequences, beyond which what was normal ceases to be normal. The last time AMOC underwent a major reorganization was approximately 12,800 years ago, during what geologists call the Younger Dryas event. Average temperatures in Europe dropped by as much as 10 degrees Celsius within a period of decades. The climate reorganization lasted approximately 1,200 years. 1,200 years. The agriculture that feeds Europe would not survive a shift of that magnitude. The political systems, the water supplies, the infrastructure, all of it is built on the assumption that the ocean will keep doing what it has been doing for 12,000 years. That assumption is no longer guaranteed. The second change is the one that is easiest to see, and the one that has accelerated most dramatically in the last 3 years. In April of 2024, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, made an announcement that received some coverage in environmental news, but almost none in mainstream media. The world had entered its 4th global coral bleaching event, not a regional bleaching event, not a bleaching event in one ocean or one reef system or one country, a global bleaching event. To understand what this means, you need to understand what coral actually is. A coral reef is not a rock, it is not a plant. A coral reef is an animal, or rather, it is a colony of billions of tiny animals, coral polyps, each one smaller than a pencil eraser, each one living inside a calcium carbonate skeleton it builds for itself. The polyps live in a symbiotic relationship with microscopic algae called zooxanthellae, which live inside their tissues, photosynthesize sunlight, and provide the coral with up to 90% of its energy. The zooxanthellae are also responsible for the coral's color. When ocean water gets too warm, the zooxanthellae become stressed. They begin producing reactive oxygen compounds that are toxic to the coral. The coral, in response, expels the zooxanthellae from its tissues. The coral turns white. This is bleaching. A bleached coral is not dead. Not yet. It has lost its primary food source, but it is still alive, still trying to survive. If the water cools quickly enough, the zooxanthellae can return. The color can come back, and the coral can recover. If the water stays warm too long, the coral starves. It dies. Its skeleton remains, white, silent, empty. And what was once a habitat for thousands of species becomes rubble. The fourth global bleaching event that NOAA confirmed in April of 2024 has been the most extensive ever documented. Between January of 2023 and September of 2025, bleaching level heat stress affected approximately 84% of the world's coral reef area. 84%. Mass bleaching was recorded in at least 83 countries and territories. In Little Cayman, a small island in the Caribbean that had been largely spared from previous bleaching events, whose reefs had been protected by a combination of geography and luck. Scientists conducting regular reef surveys in September of 2023 found that only 7.38% of corals remained healthy. 7.38%. 92.62% of the corals on those surveys were either bleached or in the process of dying. By January of 2024, over 53% of all coral colonies on the survey transects were dead. This was not a degraded reef in a heavily polluted area. This was a protected reef in a designated no-take marine reserve on an island with minimal direct human impact. The protection did not matter. The marine reserve did not matter, because the threat was not local pollution or overfishing. The threat was the temperature of the water, and no marine reserve can change the temperature of the water. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, but they support approximately 25% of all marine species. A quarter of all ocean life depends on an ecosystem that covers less than 1% of the ocean. Coral reefs are the nurseries of the sea. They are where juvenile fish grow. They are the feeding grounds, the spawning grounds, the shelter for the foundations of ocean food chains. If the fourth global bleaching event continues at its current trajectory, and there is no physical mechanism currently in place that will stop it, the consequences for ocean food systems, for fisheries that feed hundreds of millions of people, for the coastal protection that reefs provide to islands and low-lying coastlines, will be felt for generations. This is not a future problem. This is happening right now, in the water, on every reef, on every ocean on this planet, right now. Before we go to change 3, I want to stay with the reefs for a moment, because there is a detail about coral bleaching that almost nobody discusses, and it is the detail that keeps marine biologists awake at night more than any other. It is not the bleaching itself that is the long-term catastrophe. It is the recovery time. After a bleaching event, if the water cools, corals can begin to recover. But recovery is slow. A heavily bleached reef that survives an event may take 10 to 15 years to return to full health. Some components of reef structure take decades to rebuild. Before the era of global warming, major bleaching events occurred roughly every 25 to 30 years, long enough for reefs to recover between events. The first global bleaching event was in 1998. The second was in 2010. The third was from 2014 to 2017. The fourth began in 2023 and is still ongoing. The intervals between events are shrinking, 25 to 30 years, then 12 years, then 4 years, then 6 years, and the events themselves are getting longer and more intense. Scientists at the IPCC have projected that at 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming above pre-industrial levels, a threshold the world is currently on track to exceed within this decade, between 70 and 90% of the world's coral reefs will experience annual bleaching events. Annual, not every few years, not every decade, every year. A reef that bleaches every year cannot recover. A reef that cannot recover dies. 70 to 90% of coral reefs experiencing annual bleaching at 1.5 degrees. And current trajectories put the world on a path toward 2 to 3 degrees of warming this century. The mathematics of this are not complicated, and they are not comfortable. The third change is the one that most people, if they think about ocean science at all, have some awareness of, but almost nobody understands how far along it is. Ocean acidification. The ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This is one of the reasons atmospheric carbon dioxide levels have not risen as fast as they would have otherwise. The ocean is a massive carbon sink, absorbing roughly 25% of all carbon dioxide human civilization emits every year. When carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid. The ocean is becoming more acidic. Since the pre-industrial era, since approximately the year 1800, the average pH of the ocean surface has decreased by 0.1 pH units. 0.1. That sounds small. It is not small. pH is a logarithmic scale. A change of 0.1 pH units represents a 26% increase in acidity. In 200 years, the ocean has become 26% more acidic than it was at the start of the Industrial Revolution. In terms of geological time, this is instantaneous. The ocean has not experienced acidification at this rate in at least 56 million years, a period called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, a mass extinction event that eliminated a significant fraction of deep-sea species. The difference between now and 56 million years ago is the rate. The acidification happening now is occurring 10 times faster than it did during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. 10 times faster. So what does a 26% increase in acidity actually mean for the ocean? It means that calcium carbonate, the substance that oysters, clams, sea urchins, coral, and the vast majority of the ocean's shell-forming organisms build their structures from, is becoming harder to maintain. Calcium carbonate dissolves in acidic water. The more acidic the water becomes, the more energy organisms need to expend building their shells and skeletons. At a certain threshold, a threshold that some parts of the ocean are already approaching, the water becomes corrosive to calcium carbonate. The shells dissolve. A study published in 2020 by researchers at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution found that shells of pteropods, tiny, free-swimming sea snails that are a critical food source for salmon, herring, mackerel, and many whale species, collected from the California current, were dissolving. The shells showed signs of corrosion consistent with exposure to water that was too acidic to maintain calcium carbonate structures. These are not rare animals. Pteropods are among the most abundant organisms in the ocean. In some ocean regions, there are literally thousands of them in a cubic meter of water. They are a foundational component of the food chain. Their shells are dissolving. And it is not just pteropods. Oysters on the Pacific coast of the United States have been experiencing failures in their larval hatcheries since the mid-2000s. When hatchery operators investigated, they found that the pH of the incoming seawater had dropped enough to prevent oyster larvae from forming their shells properly. Commercial oyster farms that had operated successfully for decades began failing, not because of pollution, not because of disease, because the chemistry of the water had changed. The Pacific Coast oyster industry responded by installing chemical monitoring systems and pH-adjusting equipment in their hatcheries to artificially maintain conditions the ocean no longer provides naturally. They are building life support systems for their animals because the ocean can no longer sustain them. And this is for species that live near the surface, in the most monitored waters on the planet. In the deep ocean, in the water that will eventually upwell to replace surface water as the global circulation continues, the acidification is more severe, and almost nobody is watching. The fourth change is the one that sounds the most clinical, but has the most immediate consequences for human food supply. The ocean is losing its oxygen. Water that is warmer holds less dissolved oxygen. As the ocean surface warms, the amount of oxygen the water can carry decreases. At the same time, warmer surface water creates a stronger temperature stratification, a more rigid barrier between the warm surface layer and the cold, deep water below, which reduces the mixing that normally brings oxygen-rich surface water down to depth. The result is deoxygenation. The expansion of what scientists call oxygen minimum zones, regions of the ocean where dissolved oxygen levels drop so low that most marine life cannot survive. Scientists project a 3 to 4% reduction in the ocean's total dissolved oxygen by 2100. 3 to 4% sounds modest. It is not modest. In an oxygen minimum zone, fish cannot stay. They move to the edges, where oxygen levels are higher, but space is more limited. Commercially important species, tuna, cod, swordfish, are being compressed into smaller and smaller habitable ranges. The dead zones we have already discussed, the hypoxic zones that form in coastal areas from agricultural runoff, are permanent fixtures in some regions and are expanding year by year. The Gulf of Mexico dead zone now forms every summer. The Baltic Sea has persistent dead zones that cover thousands of square kilometers. The Black Sea has a permanent oxygen minimum zone that occupies most of its deep water. And climate-driven deoxygenation is expanding these zones and creating new ones in the open ocean, far from any coast, far from any direct human impact, driven purely by the physics of warm water holding less oxygen. A study published in 2021 in the journal Nature Climate Change found that oxygen minimum zones in the open ocean had expanded by approximately 37 million square kilometers over the past 50 years. 37 million square kilometers. For context, that is roughly the area of Africa. An area the size of Africa in the open ocean has become inhospitable to most marine life. Not this century, not in our parents' lifetimes, but in the last 50 years, during your lifetime, or your parents' lifetimes. This is not a problem for the future. This is a change that has already happened. I need to stop here for a moment, because if you have been listening, you have noticed something. These four changes, AMOC weakening, coral bleaching, ocean acidification, deoxygenation, are not independent. They are not four separate problems running in parallel, each one concerning on its own. They interact. Scientists have a name for the combination of warming, acidification, and deoxygenation. They call it the deadly trio. The three work together in ways that amplify each other's effects. A coral bleached by warming is weaker. A weaker coral is less able to build its calcium carbonate skeleton under the stress of acidification. A reef damaged by bleaching and acidification provides less shelter and food, which reduces the fish populations that would otherwise help control the algae that competes with coral for space on the reef. And as the reef degrades, the fish leave, and the water becomes slightly more stratified, slightly less oxygenated, slightly less able to support the invertebrate communities that would otherwise help the coral recover. Each stressor makes the others more effective. Each damaged system is less able to resist the next shock. This is what scientists mean when they talk about ecological resilience. A healthy reef can absorb a bleaching event and recover. A reef that is already stressed by acidification and reduced oxygen has less resilience. The same bleaching event that a healthy reef would survive kills a stressed reef. And the stresses are not going away. They are increasing. This is the halfway point of this video, and I want to ask you something. If you've been watching and you feel a mix of concern and helplessness, that is a rational response to what the data shows. The impulse to stop listening, to scroll away, to put this problem in a box labeled too big to think about. That impulse is understandable. But I want you to stay, because the fifth change is the one that most directly affects you, regardless of where you live or whether you have ever seen the ocean. And because after the fifth change, I want to tell you something that the data also shows, something that most people who cover this topic leave out. Subscribe to Abyss Files if you have not already. This channel exists for exactly this. The things that are happening right now that most people have not been told about. Let us talk about the fifth change. Marine heat waves. You know what a heat wave is. A period of abnormally hot weather, days or weeks when temperatures are significantly above the seasonal average. Events that cause heat-related illness, that stress infrastructure, that kill crops. The ocean has heat waves too. A marine heat wave is defined as a period when ocean surface temperatures exceed the 99th percentile for that location and time of year for at least 5 consecutive days. In other words, not just warm, exceptionally warm. In the top 1% of all recorded temperatures for that place at that time of year for 5 days or more. Before the era of global warming, marine heat waves were rare, exceptional, anomalies in the data that scientists noted and studied because of how unusual they were. They are no longer unusual. Marine heat waves have doubled in frequency since 1982. They have become longer, more intense, more geographically extensive. And 2023 brought a marine heat wave that was unlike anything in the instrumental record. Beginning in the spring of 2023, ocean temperatures in the North Atlantic, and then across most of the global ocean, began rising in a way that scientists struggle to explain. The anomaly was not just large, it was the wrong shape. Previous marine heat waves had been regional, limited to one ocean basin or one current system or one geographic area. The 2023 event was global. By the summer of 2023, the average global sea surface temperature had shot past every previous record, not just by a small margin, but by a gap that several oceanographers described publicly as shocking. Carina von Schuckmann, an oceanographer at Mercator Ocean International, said the 2023 temperature anomaly was off the charts, off the charts. The marine heat wave contributed directly to the fourth global bleaching event. It contributed to dramatic changes in weather patterns across the Northern Hemisphere. It contributed to the unusual hurricane seasons of 2023 and 24. And it did not fully end. 2024 continued to set records. The world's oceans are absorbing heat at a rate that the Scripps Institution of Oceanography found to be 60% higher than the previous IPCC study had predicted. 60% higher than the prediction. That gap between what the models expected and what the instruments measured is not a sign that the models were slightly off. It is a sign that something in the ocean system is responding to warming faster than the scientific community anticipated. Marine heat waves kill directly. The 2023 event caused near-total mortality of branching corals in the middle and lower Florida Keys. Complete losses occurred at several coral nurseries that had been maintaining threatened coral species for replanting programs. Programs designed specifically to help reefs recover from previous bleaching events. The plants were killed before they could be replanted. Marine heat waves also affect fish. Temperature-sensitive species move. Their prey does not always move with them. Feeding relationships that have been stable for millennia are disrupted. Spawning timing shifts. Juvenile survival rates drop. The California sardine fishery collapsed in the 1940s after a marine heat wave devastated the sardine population. It took decades to partially recover. The 2015 Pacific marine heat wave, nicknamed the Blob, contributed to the collapse of several Pacific salmon runs, to harmful algal blooms that close shellfish harvesting across thousands of miles of coastline, to the deaths of hundreds of sea lions, seabirds, and whales from starvation when their prey moved to depths and temperatures beyond their reach. That was a regional event. What is happening now is global. Now, I want to tell you about something that most coverage of ocean change leaves out completely. It is not a sixth crisis. It is not another problem to add to the list. It is a connection between everything we have discussed today and the daily life of every person on Earth, regardless of whether they live near the coast, regardless of whether they eat seafood, regardless of whether they have ever thought about the ocean in their lives. The ocean produces over 50% of the oxygen in every breath you take. Not forests, not land plants. The ocean, specifically phytoplankton, the microscopic algae that float in the sunlit surface layer of the ocean and photosynthesize, just as land plants do, converting carbon dioxide to oxygen. Every second breath you take was made possible by phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are sensitive to temperature. They are sensitive to ocean chemistry. They are sensitive to the availability of nutrients, the iron, nitrogen, and phosphorus that upwelling brings from the deep ocean to the surface. A warming ocean stratifies more strongly. Strong stratification reduces upwelling. Reduced upwelling means fewer nutrients at the surface. Fewer nutrients means less phytoplankton. Since 1950, global phytoplankton populations have declined by approximately 40% in some regions of the ocean. 40%. The implications of that number are difficult to fully process. Phytoplankton are the base of the marine food chain. Everything that lives in the ocean depends, directly or indirectly, on phytoplankton. Every fish, every whale, every seabird, and the oxygen. When scientists model scenarios in which ocean warming continues at current rates, their models show continued phytoplankton decline. The models show the ocean becoming, over the course of this century, less biologically productive, less oxygenating, less capable of absorbing the carbon dioxide that is causing all of these changes in the first place. A less productive ocean absorbs less carbon, which means more carbon stays in the atmosphere, which means more warming, which means a less productive ocean. This is what climate scientists call a feedback loop, and it is already running. I have spent most of this video telling you what is going wrong. I want to spend the last part of it telling you something else, because the data that shows the ocean is changing also shows something that almost never makes the news. It shows that when we stop doing the things that damage the ocean responds. When the Montreal Protocol eliminated the chemicals destroying the ozone layer in the 1980s and 90s, the ozone layer began recovering. It is not fully recovered. It may not fully recover in our lifetimes, but the trajectory changed. When commercial whaling was reduced by the 1986 moratorium, humpback whale populations in some regions began recovering. Fin whales were seen in the Antarctic in numbers not recorded since before industrial whaling began. When fishing pressure is reduced in specific areas, when marine protected areas are established and enforced, fish populations inside those areas recover, sometimes dramatically, sometimes within years. The ocean is not dead, it is under extreme stress. It is changing faster than at any point in human history. It is approaching thresholds that, once crossed, may be irreversible on human timescales. But it is also resilient. The same capacity that allowed it to absorb 200 years of heat and carbon without showing obvious signs of damage at the surface is a capacity that could, given the chance, drive recovery. The question is whether that chance comes in time. In 2023, the same year the ocean ran its fever, the same year the fourth global bleaching event began, scientists at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography published a paper that documented something unexpected in a small area of restored kelp forest off the coast of California. The kelp forest had been largely destroyed by a combination of pollution, urchin overpopulation, and warming water. A conservation team spent years removing the urchins, reducing local pollution, and waiting. The kelp came back. When the kelp came back, the fish came back. When the fish came back, the sea otters came back. When the sea otters came back, they ate the urchins that would otherwise have grazed the kelp back to nothing. The system reorganized. The feedback loop ran in reverse. It took years of active work and a significant investment of money and effort and scientific expertise. But it worked. The ocean that heated to record temperatures in 2023 is the same ocean that grew a kelp forest back from nothing off the coast of California. Both of those things are true simultaneously. The ocean is in crisis, and the ocean has the capacity to recover if we give it the conditions it needs. Right now, we are not giving it those conditions. We are adding heat. We are adding carbon dioxide. We are adding the fresh water from melting ice that is weakening the circulation that keeps the northern hemisphere livable. The 5 changes we have discussed today are not inevitable consequences that cannot be altered. They are the consequences of specific things we are doing, which means they can be changed by doing different things. The AMOC can be stabilized if warming is limited and Greenland's melt rate slows. The coral bleaching events can be spaced further apart if ocean temperatures stop rising. The acidification can slow if carbon dioxide emissions are reduced. The dead zones can shrink if nutrient runoff from agriculture is managed. The marine heat waves can become less frequent and less intense if the ocean surface temperatures drop. None of this is easy. None of it is fast. None of it will happen without significant change to how human civilization generates energy and manages land and governs the global commons of the atmosphere. But the physics work in both directions. The same ocean that absorbed our excess heat for 200 years can absorb the benefits of our changed behavior if we change our behavior. The ocean has been watching. It has been absorbing. It has been changing quietly beneath the surface in ways that most people on this planet are only now beginning to understand. Now it is showing us what it has been holding and asking a question that only we can answer. Subscribe to Abyss Files. The ocean keeps showing us things we were not looking for. We will keep going back.